Hey, welcome back. It's Nico from the band Whorticulture, and I dressed up just for you today because today I want to tell you the story of my journey into the goth scene. So I've been a part of the goth scene in different ways on and off for probably the last 20 years, but I didn't always consider myself part of the scene. I consider myself someone who maybe just dabbled in it or sometimes worked in it or various things. And that's what I think, because I was often a contrarian in my teenage years, my 20s, and I didn't like to be labeled. I didn't want to be put in a group. I didn't want to feel those things. And lately, the last couple of years, I've really come back to embrace my inner goth kid. I always say kid when I say goths. For some reason, like the goth kids. I don't know why. It's always a thing. Doesn't matter how old they are. They could be 50 and they're still a goth kid. Yes, I'm embracing my inner goth kid, and I have for several years. It is the scene that I feel the most at home. It is the scene I feel that is most me, and I feel most comfortable, and represents most of what I like, I guess. So I'm gonna take you all the way into the past, into my childhood years. I don't know why I'm doing this kind of a voice, probably because it's gothy. Is it? That doesn't sound gothy. Gotta be more like this if I go to my childhood, blah, 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 blah. I'm allowed to make fun of it because I'm part of it. Shut up. When I was young, I was very into pop, R&B, and hip-hop music from the 80s because that's when I grew up. And I especially loved to dance. And this is gonna be relevant coming forward. You think about, what does this have to do with goth music? I'm getting there. But yes, I love to dance. And I was also attracted to darker, more emotional music, and that wasn't necessarily within the pop and R&B and the hip hop stuff. Although there were some crossover songs that had a more melancholy, introspective feel. But I was always attracted to more minor style music, in addition to the catchy, poppy, danceable, electronic kind of stuff that I grew up with. I remember, this must have been, I don't know, second, third grade, something like that. I remember I was working on choreography to CNC Music Factory. And I was thinking, man, it'd be so cool if I could get like a dance troupe together at my school and then we could like perform at assemblies. It'd be just like New Kids on the Block. It'd be sweet. That never happened, but I did have that idea and I wanted to be able to do that. In my mind, that was super sweet. Fast forward to my teenage years, just getting into becoming a teenager, like 12, 13, somewhere around there, moved to a new school, was exposed to new people. Suddenly, I transitioned very, very rapidly from pop, R&B, and hip hop, and probably Eurodance, as dance, to rock with Nirvana, and then very fast from there to much darker stuff. And one of the very first things I got into after Nirvana was Danzig. And I got really, really into Danzig in my early teenage years. And there was something about the really dark imagery of what Glenn would write that attracted me. And it's funny because I've never been like a horror movie person, which I know is a stereotype of generally either metal or goth scene. I'm supposed to really like horror movies. I'm not really into it that much. And I was never really into like the occult or those kind of things that much. And yet, for some reason, the artwork, the lyrics, the style, the music of Danzig's stuff really spoke to me as a teenager. I was very intrigued and I wanted to know more. Then, of course, got into a lot of the typical hard rock and metal that was around at the time. People were showing me a lot of these same things. So Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, White Zombie, which is still badass. So I had a lot of this, but it was still, I think, the dark sound of someone like Danzig that really captivated me, that's had this interest. Of course, then I also got into, very soon after that, 9 Inch Nails. So there's your, again, very obvious goth crossover type band. And in 1994, there was a certain movie that's going to be extremely easy for you to guess, that influenced pretty much every kid, saying kid again, in the goth scene. Almost everyone cites it as an influence, and it's almost annoying to have to say that it was an influence for me too, because gotta be individual, gotta be unique, gotta be a contrarian, right? Can't say this one movie. What was that movie? You probably already guessed it. What was the thing? That's right, The Dallas Connection. Yeah, The Crow. There's the fucking Crow, like everyone else. It's badass. I'm sorry. It really is. I taped it off of like HBO or Cinemax, and I remember just watching the hell out of that. And that style, that look, again, really appealed to me. That dark look with the boots, all black with the makeup and the long hair. Interesting. Should do that at some point. It was very appealing to me. And I didn't really have too much of a reference of that when I was growing up. As I said, I had the hip hop and pop and R&B. I never had this stuff. And something about it just really spoke to me. Again, emotionally, aesthetically, I just thought it was the coolest fucking style ever. It also opened me up to a lot of other artists. That's where I found My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, which I was into for a while as well. Great soundtrack. And if you're watching this, you probably already know that's a fucking great soundtrack, and you were influenced by this movie as well. So now I was interested in the style. I was interested in the look and a lot of the bands that are sort of surrounded within the scene, but I still was not into, I guess, more of the traditional things that are cited as goth music. Into my high school years, I was much more into hard rock and metal, but in the industrial sort of flair as well, because I was into Ministry, in addition to the Nine Inch Nails that I mentioned. Later on, I was getting into sort of electro rock bands, Gravity Kills, Orgy. I always loved the look of Orgy, by the way. I always thought that was really cool. Those are, again, similar vibe where they had a very dark look, but it was almost that sort of cyber goth, very shiny clothing. And I had a lot of that. I had the vinyl pants in high school. I grew my hair out very long. I started dyeing it black. I started wearing makeup. I started wearing boots. I had both the smaller, like the 8 or 10 eyelet Docs, and then I had the really tall, knee-high Docs that I would wear. Those weren't, I think there was a different brand, but they were like shiny patent leather or vinyl. I'd wear crazy pants. I'd wear band shirts that were ripped, that had fishnets underneath them. And still, this whole time, I didn't really consider myself a goth kid. I liked the influence of it. I liked things about it, but my need as a teenager to be my own unique person, to dress differently however the fuck I wanted, overruled the obvious that I was basically dressing and acting that way, that this is who I was. I was being that person. So even though I dressed this way quite often in high school, and I was one of the few that did it, there wasn't really any other person in my high school that was dressing that way. I didn't really identify as a goth kid. I guess I just fucking hate labels, or used to, or something. I don't know. Right after high school, a friend of mine took me to my first rave, and it was fucking awesome. I loved it. So, right after high school, we started going regularly, once a week, to a local club, as opposed to going to a club that's not local whatsoever. And we start dancing to trance and progressive house. And this was the first time since I was a child that I had another outlet for dancing. And it made me realize again how much I love expressing myself through movement, through dance, and how important that really is to me. And my friend and I would learn all the moves, so I would learn much more like staccato, pop and lock style moves, robotic moves, and then of course your whole liquid dancing kind of stuff, and then body manipulation, where you'd pull up your it reminds me of Conan O'Brien now, but at the time I didn't know Conan was doing that, but it's very much like treat yourself like a puppet. You have your hands on a string, that kind of stuff, and it was really, really fun. It was very creative, and I had a lot of fun going to clubs and raves during that time. Around the same time, another friend of mine decided that we should go to a goth club that was in town. Again, local. I think it was called Onyx at the time. They've changed names like 12 times. So we start going to this club. And remember, in high school, I was already dressing this way. I was into many, many things that were at least crossover, like Nine Inch Nails. And at the end of my high school years, I got really into Depeche Mode as well, which became one of my biggest influences of all time. And naturally, they play that in the clubs. So I liked a lot of the music when we would go to this club. But I wasn't joining in. I wasn't dancing. I wasn't participating, which you would probably assume right now that I was like, oh, sweet, it's the darker music and combined with dancing, this is perfect. Yes, but not right away. First, I had to be a dick, apparently. I'll tell you. So, we would go to these clubs. This club, I think we only went to the one, but we went a couple times. We'd go there, we would sit away from the dance floor. There was a dance floor, and then there was a separated area with some chairs. It was kind of in the dark. Naturally, it's in the shadows. and we could observe people dancing and judge them harshly for it. Sorry. I'm being honest. That's what I did. That's what we did. It was funny, though. Does that help? Probably not. Yeah, I was kind of a dick. So we would sit there and we would look at people's dancing styles. And what we would try to do is come up with nicknames for them based on their movement styles. And I remember there was one girl who the entire time would bend over and would just punch, punch, punch. The whole song, never change. She wouldn't, move anything, wouldn't like punch, do a knee, kick, elbow, this, anything else, step. No. Punch, 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 whoops, punch the camera. Punch, punch. So naturally, we gave her the unpredictable and very creative name, Punchy. Yeah, well, that's what she did, so there you go. Not super creative. So we had Punchy. There was a girl who used to do this a lot. This thing. It's this loop and like this. And it always looked like she had something in her hand, or she would technically have something, like something very thin, like a piece of paper, and then she was like, putting it somewhere? So almost like letters. Stuffing letters in mailboxes is what she would do this. So she became the crazy mailman, naturally. Didn't know why she's that crazy, but that was the name that sounded funny. And then my favorite was always the kid who would do the crossover and stomp. So these are the legs, by the way. I know they look like arms, but let's use our imagination. So he would lift his legs, whoop, boom, stomp, 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 stomp. Now this is a very common move in the goth clubs. The cross and stomp thing. But he would do it in such a way that he would do that almost constantly, and then occasionally a spin. And then back to stomp. So he became Crossy LaRue. So I remember enjoying these characters and having a good time going to see them every time I went to the club, but still not participating, still not dancing, having to apparently remain an outsider and to make fun of it, even though I kind of liked it at the same time. So it was weird back and forth, and I was kind of torn by it. One night we go, and I get flyers for an after-hours club that had S&M and bondage stuff, and so we look at each other and go, should we do it? Fuck yeah, I've never been to anything like this, let's go. So we go after the club's done, and there's people on these big X's, right, strapped in, being like lightly whipped. And we're kind of like, okay, that's not really that interesting to me. There's some people being led around in like GIMP outfits and all vinyl, and people doing like body painting stuff, like body painting liquid vinyl stuff, not just like, here's a rainbow, dear, here's your body painting. Here's a clown. It was kind of interesting because it was something I'd never seen before, at least experienced directly in person. But after a while, I was kind of like, Luckily, there was a DJ. And the DJ was playing some pretty decent stuff. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm actually going to start dancing to this stuff. I'm going to dance. So I decided to go out there on the little dance floor, and I was having a good time, and I was dancing. And then suddenly, this one song comes on. And I was transfixed. I was like, oh my God, this song is fucking amazing. And I was dancing so intensely to it. It was so emotional, and it was driving, and it was catchy. And I had to go up to the DJ after the song was done. I was like, holy shit, what the fuck song was that? And he tells me that it was Diary of Dreams, Butterfly Dance. So I went home and went on either CD Now or Amazon, if you remember CD Now before they got absorbed. And I ordered that CD. And I think it was probably either the very next day. And I listened to the hell out of it. So that was my first real club music, even though I know they play some Nine Inch Nails stuff, they will play some Depeche Mode stuff. But stuff that's more niche inside that club scene, and I fucking loved it. Absolutely fucking loved it. Fast forward a few years later, and I end up, through totally random, weird circumstances, I end up having my own DJ night at a really shitty dive bar, and it was really fun. I did a rock night at the time because that's where most of my knowledge was. I had never DJ'd before. I had to figure that out on the fly. Well, it was kind of awkward, but it was a really good time. It only lasted, I'd say, half a year. But during that half a year, there were bartenders, bar backs, and security people that I got to know really well that happened to work at a bunch of other clubs that were associated, that were owned by the same people. And they worked at those clubs on, obviously, the other nights, as opposed to working them on the same nights, which would be really confusing for scheduling. So as I got to know these people, I would go to hang out with them on my off nights when they would work over at these other clubs that happened to do goth nights. So here I am, like I used to do back at Onyx, when I would just sit in the shadows with a friend who wouldn't dance, and we would just kind of laugh and come up with funny names. I'm back at the club, but I'm hanging out with, let's say, the door staff, and we're just having a good time joking around. I'm getting to know a lot of the patrons. I go downstairs, have a drink, because I'm older at this point, because it's in the future. Did you know that? In the future, I'm older. Crazy. Having a few drinks with bartenders and bar backs and all these kind of things. And as I get more familiar with the songs they're playing, like the DJs that I get to know as well, I start liking all these different songs. I'm sure that's probably my first exposure to things like VNV and Assemblage 23 and a lot of these other people in the scene. So I start dancing, and I start going out pretty regularly on like Sundays, and I don't remember what else other days I went out. Doesn't matter at all. Start going out on pretty regularly. So I'm dancing and enjoying it and seeing my friends. And then we often would go to an after hours place that I really miss. We had this cool like bar cafe thing in downtown Denver called Cafe Netherworld. And we would often go there before club, and we'd all meet there after club illegally. And we'd shut the doors and go back in the back room and we would drink. But it was fun. I felt like I was part of it. I felt like I was involved in a scene for once. And for being a person who's always sort of felt on the outside of social groups, who's felt always kind of ostracized and never really felt like I was part of anything. And I'm not going to go into all the detail of those stories at the moment. Always was the weird kid, always was the one who was kind of on the outside of groups looking in and never really feeling like a part of anything. I felt like I was a part of something, and I think that's probably a hallmark of the goth scene and the goth culture, is a lot of people who felt like outsiders, felt like rejects, felt like losers or whatever it is, freaks, and they find a place where they feel welcome and they feel less judged, unless they have someone like me in the shadows when I was younger, judging them and coming up with funny names. Sorry, I'm being honest. That's who I was. That's what I used to do. So once my DJ gig fell through, as I said, it only lasted a few months, I actually took up a job working the front door at one of the goth clubs. And I would do that a couple times a week, and naturally got to be exposed to the music even more. Some of my friends would come down and they'd get super drunk and they would dance, and they would come up and talk to me and like, oh dude, that song was awesome. I danced my ass off and then I got shots. Like, that's great, good for you. I'm just standing up here the whole time not being able to dance or have fun, and I'm in a bad mood, so sweet. But I still enjoyed the music. I got to know a lot of the regulars. In fact, I even got to the point where I was dating one of the bartenders in the scene, and once we broke up, it was kind of the catalyst for me to want to get the fuck out of there. I didn't want to have to see her all the time, although we broke up fairly amicably. I didn't want to have to see her every single time I came to work or see her start dating new people. And I was just kind of over the nightlife. I was never a big nightlife-y kind of person. I mean, it was fun for a while because it was new and it was different and exciting. And then after a while, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm tired all the time. I don't want to do this. I want to do other stuff. So after we separated, I left the clubs. And I actually left the clubs for several years, and I wasn't involved. And kind of stayed away, focused on other things, was into other styles of music for a while, worked on other music projects with my other band. And then there came a point where I realized, you know what? I really miss the scene. I don't remember when it hit me, but I think a couple of my friends were saying, hey, we should go out to the clubs again. We never go. I kind of miss dancing and doing that. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I haven't danced in a long time. I haven't heard that music in a long time. I kind of miss some of the people that I used to know, some of the regulars, some of the staff. Wonder if they're still there. Well, a few years later, I started coming back. Started coming back as a patron this time. to the club that I used to do the door. And so I would go and I would dance, and I would get a great cardio workout, and I would start to see the familiar faces that I knew from years ago. And I would meet new people. Some of those people are my friends right now, and one of whom is actually probably the person that I am most close to and most connect with. And I wouldn't have met that person if it were not for the scene. But I love to dance. I love dark stuff. I like moody, atmospheric, introspective, emotional stuff. I like aggressive stuff that makes me want to fucking punch and kick and do all that stuff. And the scene has all that. And it's such a wonderful scene of all of the weirdest people and a lot of the most broken people, but also a lot of the most interesting people, creative types, sensitive types, interesting people who don't feel like they have a place anywhere else, in any other club. They would not fit in, they would not belong, they would be ridiculed. And here, as long as everyone is nice, as long as everyone is respectful about people's personal space, because one thing you know about the clubs is don't get in my fucking space. When the song is on, and it's my fucking song, mine, well, sometimes now, don't fucking get in my space. Use your peripherals. But beyond that, you come in with a positive attitude, we're gonna respect that and we're gonna treat you well. You look like you're having fun, great. So yeah, that's my journey into that. I was interested in many of the aspects. I kept was on the surface or on the perimeter all the time. I was always interested in the styles and the looks and some of the music and this and this and that. But I kept kind of staying away, and I would push myself away until I finally, later on in the last handful of years, really just embraced it and realized that really at heart, I am a goth kid. I kind of always have been, but I've been rebelling against it, at least in terms of a label or in terms of a group belonging to something. I realize of any scene I've ever been a part of or have ever been involved with, this is the one scene, as I said at the beginning, that I feel most like me, that I feel like I can express myself the way I want to. It involves the kind of music I want to listen to, the way that I want to interact at a club, the way that I want to be, the way that I want to dance. And I feel comfortable, and I feel like I'm at home. What is it that you really love about the goth club scene? Is it the people? Is it the style? Is it the music? Is it the dancing, self-expression? Is it the feeling of having a place that you can be yourself, etc., etc.? I want to know. Let me know. Leave a comment with your story, what you love about the scene below. All right, with that, I am out. I'm Nico from the band Whorticulture. I will see you next time. I am mysterious, mysterious dance, hands in my face. Bye.